event with the YDNC Black Caucus. Tonight we have special guest Representative Murdock, Senator Murdock with us today. So the Black Caucus is basically um, auxiliary caucus of YDNC, Young Democrats North Carolina, and basically we host programming and events centered around Blackness and what that means in the community, not only politically but also outside of politics. So we do that primarily through different forms of engagement, like town halls, meet the candidates, and events such as lounge and vent. So I will hand it off to Kelvin now to introduce Senator Brown.
So thank you. One thing I'll say is I met Senator Murdock when she was working on a political campaign a couple of years back. So much hard work coming to the East and making sure that we were still represented in the conversation. So just starting off with the first question I want to ask, how surreal was the moment of being appointed by the governor and filling some pretty big shoes, sworn in the office as a North Carolina senator?
Yes, and so thank you again, Kelvin, and thank you to the leadership for inviting me. And can't stress enough the importance of the work that you're doing. Just a quick piece of background. I wish that I had that when I was in college. So I went to UNC Chapel Hill, and I was active with the College Democrats. But I have to be honest that I found my heart with the Black student movement. So as you know, PWIs definitely have organizations that kind of, harness the power of African American students on campus. So that's kind of where I found my home and became political action chair. But if I could have gone back, I would have remained more active with the YDs. And I think if they had something like a Black Caucus, I kind of would have found, more of a home. So thank you all for your leadership and having this. And thank you, Kelvin. Yep, it was 2016. Remember it like it was yesterday. Was working on the Deborah Ross for Senate campaign, and it was you and another young man did some amazing work in northeastern North Carolina. We have to do all we can in our rural communities. So we weren't able to get Secretary Clinton elected that year or Senator Ross, but Deborah Ross will be going to Congress next year in a very safe seat in Wake County. And just thank you for the work that you were doing. We had an event at Elizabeth City State University, and we just cannot leave our HBCUs behind with organizing. But to your question, it was very, very surreal, was very active with the Democratic Party right after that election. So I'm born and raised in North Carolina and made the conscious decision to say that I was going to stay in North Carolina after the election. So I did have opportunities to go to DC, to go to Capitol Hill, to work with some national organizations that were based in DC. But what I learned during that 2016 campaign was we just had so much work to do, and I just didn't feel comfortable walking away from my home state. Had no idea that that decision was going to lead me to the state Senate. Was serving as a soil and water supervisor, was happy during doing that work, and was recruited to run for state Senate by a number of legislators that are now my colleagues. I was already working through my soil and water work for Black farmers, for rural communities, for equity with industrial hemp. Legalizing marijuana is always a hot topic, in cannabis. So was just having a number of those conversations, primarily with the Legislative Black Caucus, and made a name for myself. And so as a result of that, was encouraged to run. And Senator McKissick took an appointment from Governor Cooper. So what you'll find out in politics is, as in life, stay ready so that you don't have to get ready. I did not plan to run in 2019. I also had a number of folks to approach me about running for county commission, and was open to that, and honestly wanted to work on a presidential campaign in 2020. I was following Senator Harris's campaign very closely, as well as Senator Warren. Ended up endorsing Senator Warren after Senator Harris was no longer in the race, and was active with the Democratic Women in Durham County, was first vice chair of the Democratic Party, currently a state executive committee member. So I knew a number of the individuals that would have made that appointment. So whenever you have a vacancy, the county executive committee, they get together and decide who is going to fill a vacancy in the event that you have a vacancy in the state house or the Senate. And with that appointment process, we were so close to the Democratic primary that I filed to run for state Senate. And the understanding was that we would have a primary, and whoever prevailed would be appointed to the seat. And so ran a strong campaign, was able to win by 8 points in a three-way race in the Democratic primary. And after that was appointed by Governor Cooper, was appointed April 1st. We were knee deep in COVID-19. So my first session and my first vote was on the COVID-19 bill. How do we get our state back to recovery? How do we fund our schools? How do we fund transportation? How do we support our healthcare agencies? How do we figure out a way for North Carolina industries to plug into all the needs that we have for COVID? How do we, try to do a better job with providing unemployment insurance? So was really, really thrown into the fire, and had the pleasure of co-sponsoring that COVID-19 bill in the Senate. So I was a primary sponsor. And so as a freshman, the first bill that I ever introduced and was a part of was signed into law. So hit the ground running, and still working hard. There's a lot of work to do. But these type of challenging times require leaders that will put people first, and that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Thank you so much for that response. And kind of to piggyback off that just a smidge, as a Black woman, how do you find yourself and your intersecting identities like helping you as you focus on things like, just kind of like
And Tia froze for a second for me.
Yeah, we lost you, Tia.
But if it's a question about intersectionality,
and like doing your everyday professional career, and even outside of politics, honestly. Yes. Oh, am I good to go?
Yes. Restate the question again.
Okay, great. It was just, how do you maintain your identity as a Black woman in these spaces where you might be in a minority, and just how do you kind of bring your full self to the table when you're doing this work?
Yes, great question. And it's something that I lean on. Everyone's seen the news and seen, I'm a Black woman, but AOC is a woman of color, and the challenges that she's facing in Congress very publicly. I'm facing something similar in my current election. I'm still on the ballot in November. My competitor has said a number of things, which I'll get into at another time, but that intersection is real. We carry it on from the work that we've done as students and as a professional, and now as a state senator. And it is a very unique experience to not only be a woman, but to be a Black woman. And so, currently we're working on issues such as police brutality, but see that a Black woman is a Black Lives Matter organizer in Florida was, assaulted, raped, and killed. So we as Black women have to carry so much, and I definitely have felt that. I've worked in Western North Carolina, where I was the only and youngest woman of color in the room. I was elected, and I'm currently 36 years old. Excited to say that I will have someone joining me next year. Shout out to Deandra Salvador out of Mecklenburg County, but I'm currently the youngest Black woman in the General Assembly. And before my election and the election of Bernetta Alston in the House, there were no Black women under 40. I'm sure a number of you are all in your 20s. We will have a Black woman in her 20s to join us, which is huge. They're already doing that in other states, so I'm excited about that. So I kind of have the, being, the youngest person, in addition to being Black, in addition to be a woman. And you definitely have to believe that you belong there. There's something called imposter syndrome. And I think sometimes when you're one of few, you can question if you really belong there. And I'm blessed that everything you do really prepares you for your destiny and the path that I believe God sets out for you. And so I was able to work through that in my 20s of being a manager of a department and having to stand up for myself, having to stand up for my staff. And I think it really comes down to just being prepared, making good relationships. A lot of politics are the same politics that you deal with in the professional world of working really hard to gain the respect of your peers and keeping your nose clean, not getting involved in anything that's petty. Sometimes we're our own worst enemy and can get in our way. But I think the beauty of serving as a Black woman is I campaigned on knowing that I could speak to issues in a manner in which that men could not. I was in my 20s when the infamous motorcycle bill would have stripped us of reproductive rights, and they were going to, they attached reproductive issues to a motorcycle bill in the House, and this was after midnight. And so I will never forget how helpless I felt and how frustrated I was with men telling me what to do with my body. And so you're in a position where you can legislate and truly, truly know the impact of that legislation, of knowing what it feels like to feel voiceless. So I think I'm also empowered by Village. There were folks that came before me. Senator Jeannie Lucas used to represent Durham, may she rest in peace. She was the first Black woman to join the Senate. We also have phenomenal leaders such as Senator Erica Smith, Senator Gladys Robertson, Senator Valerie Foushee, Senator Joyce Waddell out of Charlotte. So I was joining a group of women that are very strong and paved that path before me. Katie Dorsett out of Guilford County, Greensboro is where I was born and raised. She also served before me, was very strong in the Senate. So they opened that door so that it was easier for me to walk through that door. And I'm thrilled to bring someone even younger than me, who's also a woman of color, with me next year.
Kind of taking the conversation in a different direction. Senator Murdock, what would you tell a young Black voter who may feel like their vote doesn't matter in the current political climate?
Thank you so much for that question. Before everything was shut down by COVID-19, I was actually spending a decent amount of time at North Carolina Central. Being in the Democratic Party, we're always concerned about the numbers at Duke and Central, since there are colleges and you have a lot of voters that move around. And you have to go to them. You know, I think sometimes you're on campus and you're just really focused on, you know, finishing school. Or if you're a young person, you may say, I'm only here for this job for 1 or 2 years. I'm not going to be invested in the community. Or, you know, you may be 18 years old and think you aren't impacted by this policy. So I think what I tell folks, I talked with a young man for 30 whole minutes on Central's campus about why he should vote. And I think that it's a number of things. I think millennials and Gen Zs, unfortunately, we can just focus on ourselves. I think we can really suffer from that me culture of I'm only going to care about myself and think about myself. I don't think people think about the impact of that if they don't vote, how it impacts the public at large. So what I shared with that student was, okay, you think your vote doesn't count, but what if you and 10 of your friends feel that way? What if half of Central's campus feels that way? What if millions of people feel that way? That is how Donald Trump became president in 2016. I know so many individuals, particularly in their 20s or late teens, that thought that their vote didn't count. So what I would tell people is, for one, particularly if you're in the streets, a part of these Black Lives Matter protests, how dare you protest and not vote? If you could take that time to get a sign on with your mask and tweet and, you know, do an Instagram live about police brutality, you elect those judges, you elect those sheriffs. If you really want to impact policing, those are local policies. The individuals that set those budgets for policing, they are city council members, or either they're county commissioners that provide budgets to our sheriffs. We have a state attorney general that I used to work for, Josh Stein. They helped to develop that policy. So I think, particularly in the Black Lives Matter era, you can't say, oh, you know, my voice doesn't matter and it doesn't count. Every issue that you care about, you can trace it back to the ballot. But I will be honest in saying, because this came up on a great DNC event last night with Michael Blivens, is a lot of folks do feel like maybe they didn't get as much change as they wanted, you know, when they voted in previous elections. And I think what I would say is that's still better than what the other outcome could have been. I mean, I think Donald Trump is a perfect example of how elections have consequences. Looking at COVID-19, so many models show literally if we had a national shutdown, wear a mask, just shut everything down, literally more lives would have been spared. He is now, you know, sending law enforcement folks into cities without the approval of local government, but cannot use the power of his pen to have an executive order to shut the nation down and to make sure that we have a national mandate to wear masks. So elections do have consequences, and if you do not show up, someone else will vote, and they will not vote in your best interest.
Thank you for that answer, and also kind of leading back to what you're talking about young people, because I'm like 22, going on 22, and so it's just like I feel like a lot of my friends and I, we've kind of lost hope in certain systems, and kind of like what you're saying about the young student in Central, to kind of like thought the same way. So my question is, what is something that brings you hope, I guess, coming like forward? Because I know like we're in a time when everything's like really negative, we're all kind of at home, we're all like don't know what the future will be, what voting will be like come November. But like what's gonna bring you hope, or what is bringing you hope for what's to come?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Tia. It's honestly Generation Z. I mean, even though I talked to that young man and it took me 30 minutes to get him to vote, I'm really inspired by the fact that, the teens that were part of the school shooting in Florida and literally have turned the NRA upside down. So I'm inspired by the generation that comes behind me. I just think they have a different view of the world, but in a good way. I think that they understand how to connect technology with activism in a way that my generation kind of started, but I think Gen Z is going to take it to the next level. I'm also optimistic because I have to be. I think in politics, you really, really do have to be. And being that I'm 36 years old, for me, it is about the long game. The Senate, we're in the minority. And so I entered the Senate knowing that if I can get in at 36 and figure out the rules, figure out who the power players were, figure out the importance of various committees, then by 42, 45, you really better watch out. So to me, you have to build a bench and start now. A lot of people did start early. I definitely did. So I'm optimistic in looking at our future, and also knowing that these things take years. Using North Carolina as another example, the Republicans didn't come into power overnight. They literally planned for 50 plus years on not only getting a majority, but what they were going to do with it. So I'm optimistic, and a plug for me being in the Senate, we have a better chance of taking the state Senate than the House. So I'm already working on what bills am I going to file next year? How are we finally going to turn a corner on these things? And I think being in the minority has made me really grateful about what we can do when we do take the Senate back and the House back next year. So that's what keeps me going.
So what would you say, especially as being a Black woman, as well as being a Senate lawmaker with an obligation to almost 100,000 constituents, what would you say are some of the most pressing political issues at the moment, or laws that absolutely need to be changed right now in the General Assembly or passed?
There are so many. I know folks are tired of hearing it, but it's just real. Medicaid expansion. I mean, we have so many folks that are unemployed now, so they've lost not only their job, but their health insurance. So I literally cannot think of a better time to expand Medicaid when more individuals will be eligible for Medicaid. And it's also a win-win for the state because I serve Durham County. So we have Duke Health, we have Lincoln Health Center, we have the Durham VA. So that will provide more jobs and more economic opportunity for our healthcare system, in addition to providing critical services that folks are going to need. Because if you don't pay up front, you'll pay on the back end when these folks just show up to the ER and they're chronically ill and do not have any health insurance. And this is free money. There's absolutely no reason that we should not be expanding Medicaid. Another big one, really just as unemployment in general, we have some of the worst unemployment benefits of the nation, not only the Southeast, even Georgia during their short sessions, and they're a more red state than we are, they were able to expand their unemployment benefits during this pandemic. Some states have extended it up to 12 months. So we shouldn't be in a position where if you live in another state, you're in a better position because your state gives you more weeks of unemployment at a higher payment per week. Whereas some folks in North Carolina only getting 100 some odd dollars a week. And, we wanted to get it up to 36 weeks. And we couldn't even do that here in North Carolina. And I think also for people of color, in addition to those who are low income, I'm really concerned about the housing crisis that is going to come among that we are really on the brink of. as these eviction moratoriums are waived, folks are going to have a really, really difficult time just paying their bills and utilities if they aren't unemployed. They don't have the support they need through the state unemployment insurance program. So I'm really concerned about the fact that we're on the brink of a major, major housing crisis and the long-term financial impact that it will have on people of color, because we're seeing so many articles that are showing us that the average Black household still does not have a fraction of the wealth that these white households have when you know, just look at it per capita. And we're only going to get that much farther behind when we are in true financial duress as a result of COVID-19. So really concerned about not only a COVID package to keep us alive, but the long-term impact it will have on Black people. So it's going to take a lot of work, and we'll have to remain vigilant. As we saw in the Reconstruction era, folks want to pass one bill and say one and done. We're looking at a 5-10 year recovery for our community.
Definitely. I see that we're kind of running out of time. So is there anything that you would like to leave the young people of YDNC with, Senator Murdock? Any words of wisdom, social media, how they can find you, to keep up with your campaign going forward?
Yeah, so I'm still on the ballot in November. You all can keep up with me at Natalie4NC on Instagram, Twitter, as well as Facebook. And just want to leave you all with seize this moment. Seize this moment. You are in the midst of history. We have lost giants such as Representative John Lewis, and it is up to all of us, including all of you, to carry on that mantle. If he literally almost died for us to have the right to vote, and we're still fighting for that in 2020. So that should show you just how important voting is. Would also ask folks to fill out the census, but cannot stress enough that our ancestors are tired. They are tired. John Lewis literally died serving in office. So it is time for us to step up, to give our ancestors some rest, our elders some rest, and the time is now. No matter what small amount of time you have, we will take it from 5 minutes to 5 hours. Whatever your skill is, because you do have a skill, use that and make sure that we do all we can to fight for our great state and to make sure that the nation knows that the South has something to say, starting with North Carolina.
All right, thank you, Senator Murdock, so much for your time tonight, and thank you all so much for watching. Make sure you like the YDNC Black Caucus page to keep up with our events coming up. And one of those events is actually our Day of Action, which will be August 8th. So again, make sure you like the page so you can get some details on that and see how you can participate. So thank you all so much, and good night.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.